Hello, this is Harry Paden. I am the host of Paden's Pulpit. This is Season 2, Episode 22. The subject, Record Your Story. Season 2, Episode 22, subject, Record Your Story. My pastor, the Right Reverend Cornelius Wesley Moore, for as many years as I can remember, admonished his congregation, of which I am one. As a matter of fact, I am a deacon, serve as vice chair of the deacon board, very loyal to this man of God. He encourages his congregation to record your story. Our history is important. Too many times our history gets lost because no one knows that history. Example, my family. I love my family to death. But my mother and my father were old school. If we asked them something about the past, it would not be uncommon for them to say, "That's grown folk. Leave it alone, it's none of your business." That was a different day and time, but unfortunately, because of that attitude and no information being shared, we do not have any of that recorded history. I don't know when my mother and father was married. I don't even know when they met. I know they met in New York City, but I don't know all that vital information. I don't know things about their parents and, the little bit that I know. But I'm talking about definite information. So my parents, unfortunately, did not record their story. What we were able to decipher is what we were told, as we got older. My dad's military service. My mother died at a very young age. I was only 16, and 7 of my brothers and sisters were much younger, the youngest at 4 years old. We didn't get a chance to learn that history, and that hurts my gut, because that's an important history. That's them. That's how they came together, and that's how we, my family, are here and being created. So, after many, many times of listening to Reverend Martin say that, I finally clicked, and I've written 5 books. I am a writer. I've been a writer since junior high school. Written tons and tons of literature, newspaper articles. I've written in magazines. Now, my greatest accomplishment is 5 books, all available on Amazon Books. But now, for probably close to a couple of years, it's longer than that. I started on it years and years ago, but I didn't work on it. I just said, this is what I'm going to do one day. But probably a year ago, maybe a little less, I decided to put together what some deem as your autobiography. That's my story, my biography. And when I started it, because I write books so easily, I really do, I thought it would be just slam dunk. This is my story. I know me. I didn't hire someone, to do the writing for me. I decided to do it myself. After all, I'm a writer. Well, I'm just finishing off the 7th chapter. There are upwards of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 8 or 9 more chapters before I finish it. But it details my life. It goes from, my birth, my childhood, and right now I'm on my college experience. So you can see I have a lot. I'm a senior citizen. I have a lot more to include. But this book, I'm not looking for it to sell across the world. It probably will. So I'm not looking for it to sell across the world. I'm looking for years and years and years when I'm no longer here. One of my great grandchildren will look at this book and say, oh, this is the person that we come from, because I am somebody. I have a rich history. Now, you should record your history. Many of you are not writers. That's okay. I will have a way that you can circumvent not being a writer and still getting your story done. It does not have to be like mine. Mine is, because I'm a writer, it has to be a certain way. I'm a writer. My autobiography not be written. But the difference in writing this autobiography as opposed to some of the books is that there is no place to go for the facts except here. My older brother recently passed. I have an older sister, but they weren't privy to some of the experiences, like when I was in school, elementary school, middle school, high school. They weren't there in college. They weren't there at my jobs. They weren't there when I dealt with my kids. So they couldn't write my story adequately. So write your story. Again, I will give you. But here's what I found out about putting together this autobiography, and I shared this with my pastor. It really was so profound. I had no idea this would happen. As I began to recall and remember my growing up, there were some tragedies that really I suffered from post-stress, post-PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, like those who served in the military, because I saw some things. I saw people get shot at. I saw people die, and didn't always see it, but it was around me. My mother was strict. If it didn't happen before 6 o'clock, I didn't see it. And I was 16, I was still coming home at 6 o'clock. Thank you, Mommy. Because I lived in the projects, the Scudder Home projects. They used to call it Murder City. Not unlike some of the places that we have around these areas. But as I record some stories, oh man, it was heart-wrenching. I was there the night my mother died as a result of a respiratory distress. She had asthma. And because I lived in Newark, the ambulance took too long. The technicians, they weren't the brightest people in the world. And because of that, she died. She did not have to die that evening. As I look back, and that hurts. That rips my heart out, because the Harry Paden now would have been able to, effectuate if I had to carry her on my back. But y'all know, anyone who knows me know I'm an in-charge person. I take no guff. I'm not saying it as a brag. I'm saying it as a fact. I suffer from LMS, little man syndrome. You know the little dogs are the most terrifying dogs, so don't mess with me. But if I had been there, my mother would not have died that evening, not from that neglect. But then I went on. One day I was at the library. I had about 8 books. I've always been a prolific reader at the Newark Library downtown. And I was coming out, little guy with about 8 books, and I probably was struggling. This Caucasian guy approached me, didn't think anything of it. He said, oh, you like the library, you got a lot of books. I said, yes, I love to read, very innocently. He said, well, you'll never be as good as an Irishman. I was dumbfounded. What? What do that have to do with TNT and China? Now, see, now would be a different conversation. But back then, I didn't know what he meant. And it mystified me. I went home and I didn't share that with anyone. But for years, if I had a competition against someone of Irish descent, boy, I was into that. You would never have me compete against Irishmen and have them be better than me if I had my way, if I was better than them. Because that affected me. How dare you say that? But that's okay. As I look back, and certain other things, and it's all going to be in the book, those were traumas. And the good thing is, though I'm recalling them, I've overcome each and every one of them to be the successful man that I am. And that's great for me to be successful. But an even greater legacy to Harry Paden and his mother and father, Naomi Paden and James Paden Sr., is that my children are all A-L-L successful. And their children are now, my grandchildren are now all being successful. I even have grandchildren, great-grandchildren that are on the verge of doing great things. So this book will be a legacy. And it's taking time to write it because I can't put it together and make it jump. This is my story. It's entitled, This Is My Exodus. Thank you, Lord. It is copyrighted, so you can use the title, but I copyrighted this title. So if I find out, I can sue you. This is my Exodus. Thank you, Lord. And we know Moses took his people, the Hebrews, on an exodus from the Egyptians to the Promised Land. This is not that kind of exodus. Exodus also means to escape from. I escaped from the ghetto, from the projects. I escaped from the hateful people who want me to be nothing because of the color of my skin. And this story hopefully will motivate someone because I was born in Harlem, raised in Newark, the Scudder Home Projects of Newark, but I've traveled the world. Russia, China, throughout Europe, too many countries to name right here. I don't want to take their time. And when I did it, people paid me to go because of my intelligence. Not bragging, it's a fact. So this is my story. Record your story. Now, again, as I said, sometimes it's challenging because I write easily. But if you want to, here's some suggestions. Just dictate to someone. Just put down your thoughts. It doesn't have to be. You're not necessarily putting yours in a book. Put it together, typos and everything. Where you were born, your experiences growing up, your experiences as an adult, where you met your spouse, some of the tragic things you spoke about, because we don't like to speak about the tragic things, and I know why. Many of those things I'm writing about were way back in my mind. I said, oh yeah, that did happen. And it shocked me because it made me mad. But then as I look at it, it helps shape me into who I am, because when I get mad, when people mistreat me, I get, I guess if everybody was nice to me, I probably would be a bum. Because, like LeBron James, when you hate on me, you make me stronger. Now, I happen to see a website. It's called Storyworth. STORYWORTH. You can go, they have a website, storyworth.com. Storyworth.com. They will assist you with writing your story. From what I understand, I didn't investigate it much, for $99 a year. And how they do it is that each week they send you an email and they ask you specific questions. What was your favorite teacher? What was your favorite subject? When did you get married? And they take that information and put it into story form for you for $99. Wish I had started it that way. But I love what I'm doing. Record your story. To God be the glory. This is your legacy. Don't be ashamed of the past. Future generations need to know what made you, you. I look forward to, if God allows me to live long enough, to finishing my autobiography so I can gladly turn it over to my family. So it'll be here for time immortal. Whether it sells one book, it's not even important. It's just that I want a book with my autobiography and my story. So far, I'm proud of what I've recorded. My pastor said, You can always come back with a part two because you might say, oh, I left out something. But right now, this is my Exodus. Thank you, Lord. The autobiography of Harry Richie Rich Paden. To God be the glory. To God be the glory. Write your story.